So with the new Arctic Monkeys album coming out next month, I thought I'd take a look back at the 6 that we've had already and attempt to decide which one has been the best so far. So if we go back to the first one, whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not. In the build up to this coming out, we'd already been treated to the fantastic demo versions of many of the songs, and to this day I would rather listen to those demos than put the first album on. That sounds like a very hipster thing to say, but I think there's something special about those demos, and I don't think it's really replicated on the album. I think maybe the demos just really captured the songs at their most exciting time, as by the time they were recorded for the album, they'd already been round the block a few times, apart from the likes of View from the Afternoon, which does sound pretty great. Then favourite worst nightmare? If I'm honest, by this point I'd had my fill of Arctic Monkeys a little bit, and the first album recording has slightly put me off. However, I did love Teddy Picker, particularly the middle 8, and it was only when revisiting the album a few years later that I was really able to appreciate it. Old Yellow Bricks and 505 are standouts for me, and Brainstorm is still a good live opener. With Humbug again, I wasn't wild for the band when this came out, and I only really got into it a few years later, but it's got some excellent songs on it. Songs like Crying Lightning set a new bar for them in terms of a more dynamic sound, and I'm sure having Josh Homme help produce it helped give them a different edge, which is evident on My Propeller and Dance Little Liar, and of course Cornerstone, which is a real staple of the band. With Suck It and See, this is really when I got back on board with Arctic Monkeys. I think there's a real shift in gear with the lyrics, with a more psychedelic element being introduced, and they just work extremely well. I always wondered if Alex Turner adopted a different technique with writing lyrics at this point, and maybe tried things out like selecting random words or cut up different sentences, a la David Bowie. Every song on the album holds its own, and Don't Sit Down 'Cause I Moved Your Chair was a real signal of where the band was heading in terms of powerful riffs. Then moving on to AM. When I first heard Do I Wanna Know, I couldn't really believe how good it was, and remember annoying people with how much I was going on about it, until they heard it for themselves. The whole aesthetic that they had started on Suck It and See came to real fruition on this album, and almost every song can be deemed as a banger. There's a simplicity to it that's driven home with a lot of conviction, and it just sounds great. The album obviously had a lot of success, and I believe it put them back on the map as the most relevant guitar band in the world. Then a few years ago, we were introduced to the most recent album, Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino. This album had to be something different after the previous 2, which had followed a similar path, and it was. Written mainly on piano, it was teased as a grower by its skeptics, but that's exactly what it was for me. A lot of the songs didn't hit me straight away, but I think the title track has got to be one of the best ever songs. 4 out of 5 is also excellent, and Turner and the rest of the band really nailed it in terms of the concept that went with it, and again added another dynamic to their catalogue. And in a similar way to AM with Suck It and See, I think the new album, The Car, is going to follow on quite nicely. So overall, it's hard to choose, but in terms of impact, I'd have to say that AM is the best Arctic Monkeys album so far. That might sound a bit crazy when you consider the first album was the fastest selling debut album in UK chart history, but I think the demos had done a lot of the hard work for that album. Whereas with AM, I think the conviction of it really cemented that they're here to lead the way in terms of guitar bands, and its popularity speaks for itself. I also think it produced probably their best live performances around that time. Anyway, what's your take? Have I got it completely wrong? Let me know in the comments.